Hey everybody, how you doing? Just setting some things up here. Ran out of a little bit of time there. How's everybody doing? I'm going to check the chat. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the live podcast. Check this right here quick for a second. Okay. All right. There we go. Trying out some new gear here. Just taking a second to get ready. Let me check the chat before we get started here. See who we've got. It'll take too long for you. Let's just do it on the main page here. Evan's here. Hey, Evan. Good to see you. Chris is here. Let's see. Josh is here. David. Pop-Tart. Hey, Pop-Tart. How you doing? Good to see you. So we're just getting started with the show here. We're going to be talking about frustrations today. And we started that this weekend. Very cool topic. I've made a couple decisions about, we were going to talk about the physical frustrations about playing guitar. And I'm going to do that in a whole other podcast. This one I thought we would go mostly for beginners and those things like that. And I'm going to pay extra special attention to the like arthritis issues and those kind of things. So let's check out what the chat's doing before we get started. Chris is going to practice a little while the show's on. That's good. And Evan's hanging on the patio with his wife while the kids inside playing video games. Very nice. It's a very nice day. It's a little hot, but very sunny here. So hopefully the same over there where Evan is. And hi to Evan's wife. Happy Memorial Day. Josh got back from baseball practice. Gloria's here. Hey Gloria, great to see you. No blue shirt today. That's right. I made a big search for a shirt I had that wasn't blue just for today. So blue shirts for non-podcast recording day. White was last week. Yeah, everybody's paying attention now. Very astute. That's right. Okay, so we're going to get started. We're going to talk a lot about frustration. We're going to get dive into the topics that we were talking about. It was Friday. It was Saturday during Guitar Talk. We're going to make sure that we understand what these. A lot of times you get frustrated, you don't understand what the problems are. We're going to make sure we understand exactly what the problems are with common guitar frustrations, and then I'm going to go through each of them, and I've spent some time really diving deep into what we can do. Kevbo, nursing a trigger finger. Oh no. Oh goodness. Good to see everybody, man. Good to see you here. So we are going to get started in just a second. I gotta make sure I press record here. Josh is here to remind me about that. And you should be here. I'm going to press record there. So that's recording. Record here. That's recording. And let's see here. I'll get rid of this. This is going to be my notes here. And I think I have everything about ready. So let's see here. Okay. Let's get started. Are you ready? Are you frustrated? Have you had about enough of not knowing what you're doing and getting very low results? Join me today as we put this in the past by solving 3 of the most common frustrations for guitar players. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome, friends, to episode 126 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitarist that you've always wanted to be. Frustration. It's a big word around here, around these parts, and it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about helping other people get through their frustrations, and also with mine too. You know, there's this guitar playing thing. It's a journey, and new things come up all the time. It doesn't matter how long you've spent. So sometimes it's worth spending a little bit of time to look up the actual definition of common words, the words that we think we know exactly what they mean and we get the gist of it, but sometimes it helps to kind of put everything in focus, to pinpoint the problem and pinpoint the starting point to overcome these problems. So I looked up frustration, and this is Merriam-Webster, and it says it's a deep, chronic sense or state of insecurity and dissatisfaction arising from unresolved problems, or unfulfilled needs. Sounds like playing guitar to me, right? That's it, man. That's very, very familiar feelings. Does that sound like what you wanted when you started to learn play guitar? Is that what you signed up for when you figured out you were going to be devoting so much of your time to playing music? Obviously not. But it's something that we have to all go through. It's a constant part of most people's musical life. And so today we're going to talk about what it is, kind of put our finger on it. And we're also going to try and think about why we put up with it and what are some things we can do to say, you know what, we're going to take frustration and limit its effect on us. Get kind of bold against it because it's draining. It takes away a lot of the joys of playing music. So we have three main topics today. These came about from over the weekend when we get together on our YouTube channel with our community hangouts. I kind of posed this on a Saturday, and everyone came up with a lot of the things that they're frustrated with. There was more than this, and a few of them were really, really great topics that I'm going to devote a whole show to. But these are the ones that I thought one would be geared towards beginners, and then the other two intermediate to advanced players too. So they really hit a broad spectrum of for the listeners that we have and the viewers who are watching on YouTube. So we're going to get right into that in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat real quick before we get into number one. Make sure everything's going smooth. Okay, so let's see here. Evan says, uh-oh, a definition. Sounds like a man. Okay. Moshe's here. Great to see you, Moshe. Great to see you. Okay, so everything's going good. Does everything sound okay as I move forward? Have you seen the moth? There's a moth flying around in here. To also, there could be I may have to do a be right back screen sometime during the podcast for a package delivery pickup deal. So at some point you may see the be right back screen. It will only take me a few minutes and then I will be right back. Okay, so everything's going good. Everything sounds okay. Great. All good. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with part one. Okay, part one, frustrations with tone. Okay, let's wrap our head around that. This is something we all deal with, especially electric guitar players. And the first frustration that we'll talk about as dealing with tone is not knowing what it is that you want out of your tone, or not actually knowing what you need to get that tone. Does this sound familiar? You just know that how you sound isn't the way that you want to sound. And where do you start? That's a huge frustration. So many people deal with that. And this is another place where YouTube may not help you as much as you think it might. This is where YouTube gear reviews can put you kind of in the ditch, the same way as just blindly going in there for learning guitar. So it's a big topic. Guitar tone's a big topic. There's lots of moving parts, and there's lots of things that affect each other. So it's not a cut and dry situation, and it's not an easy one to experiment with. And it can take a very, very, very long time to figure out exactly what you want to sound like, and then knowing how to get there. So you need some help with this at first. And to find that starting point. Where do we start? Where should I begin on my purchasing? Where should I begin on seeing what it is that I want to do? If the problem that a lot of people have, is something I had too when I started off. When I just started buying gear, I just started looking at advertisements and reviews, and I think that's what a lot of us do. And it put me on a path of a lot of frustration. And it was for a very long time. I bought things that I thought would work. And from what I saw, and from when I actually had seen players who play these pieces of gear, who made them sound fantastic. And then when I got them, I didn't know how to make that gear sound fantastic. It wasn't something I could just plug in, turn it on, and it sounded great. And then the frustration starts to escalate. And you wonder, well, what is it? Is it me? Is it something that I'm doing? Did I get a defective unit? How come I don't sound, that way? And it starts to amplify. And then the more you work with this gear, because it should work, right? It should make you sound, you spent money on it. It should make you sound fantastic. And you go on YouTube, you find the gear of the day, the really cool thing with tons of features. And we're going to talk about features in a minute. And you don't sound anything like that player. So your frustration ramps up and ramps up and ramps up over time. Not a good place to start. Not a good place to get the newest thing that has come out. It rarely works well. A better way to think about this is to start with the classic, basic gear. And here's the point, of whatever the style of music that you want to play, that you want to sound like. It won't help if you love metal and then you buy a Fender amp. It's not going to help. They're two different things. You're going to spend most of your time trying to put a square peg in a round hole. You're going to be trying to do things to make that gear you have, that amplifier you have, work, to do something that it wasn't designed for. The most up-to-date amp, we're going to talk about this, the most up-to-date amp and the guitars that have lots of features is not what you need at first, because you don't know if the way that you play are going to benefit from those features that you get, all these extra bells and whistles from those things. I've learned that over the years, the more features that I have in gear, the farther away I get and the longer it takes for me to get what I need out of that gear. So now I don't look for that at all. If I see something that has too much stuff, too many neat things, I shy away from that at first. What we want to do is we want to get the basics of your style. And for electric guitars, and that's mainly what I'm talking about today, is amp, guitar, some pedals, strings, and picks. And we want to make that work for you in a classic tube amp kind of avenue there, because that's what all these modeling things are trying to sound like in the first place. And if you could get to that in the beginning and get the right sounds ahead of time, you're in good shape. Then you can experiment on top of a good tone. Let's see. Why do you see so many advanced players using what could be called ancient gear? Gear that was developed in the 1950s. Why do you see that? Why hasn't that stuff just been left like this? This is not new. Okay? This is an old design. But why do you see that? Why do you see so many advanced players using ancient gear? Because they work, and because they give you the basic tones that are going to push you in the right direction. So when you start adding on newer things and newer features and different sounds, you're accentuating what's good instead of hiding things. You're going to experiment on a core sound. And once you have that, once you have your foundation, everything else is cake. Everything else is fun to be putting on top of your great tone. You're not trying to cover up problems of your basic tone. How about this? Knowing what you want, but you don't know how to get it. That's a big frustration on gear too. Randomly buying guitars and amps to experiment with. It can be a very, very long process. It can be decades before you settle on your sound. Just by buying something, trying it for a while, it can be exhausting. How do I know? Done it. It can be decades, and we need to speed up this process. How can we get a good, solid tone? And then we can focus on playing. We can focus on really getting good on the guitar. So the number one thing is make a habit of talking to people. Make a habit of asking players who sound the way you do, their opinions on gear. What do they know? What have they found in their journey? How many years can they take off of your process with a few sentences? It's very, very valuable. And it's something it's not something to be shy about. It's something that if you were going to be bold about anything in playing guitar, that will be the thing to be bold about, is to be able to make sure that you let people know that you're interested in their sound. That's usually the first step. Say something nice, make them feel good, because people spend a lot of time and a lot of money sounding the way that they like to sound. And if you find someone who you think kind of is on the same wavelength as you, be bold. Go up to them, ask them, say, hey, sometime, even if it's like at a show, sometime could here's my number. Could we talk about gear sometime, or something like that? So that's the first thing. Make a habit out of asking players. The next is to try everything before you buy. Borrow everything if you can, but get as much knowledge as you can before you purchase. It doesn't matter what it is: guitars, amps, pedals, strings, picks. It doesn't matter. Make sure that you have as much information as you can before you make those purchases, because big purchases, and guitar purchases too, even if it's not a big purchase, if you have it, we have this kind of collecting mentality as guitar players. We like to have a lot of different stuff that we can try over time. Sometimes that stuff is not to your benefit. It's a time waster. And we like to spend our time getting better on the guitar. But if you rush into a purchase before you understand how these things work, you're making a disservice. Okay, so the other part of gear that can be very frustrating, and something that I see a lot of people asking me about how to get past this, and or they actually don't ask that. They just say, I'm this way, I don't know what to do, is never being satisfied with their sound, with their tone. Sound familiar? You're in it. If that sounds familiar, you are in it. You're either returning equipment left and right, or you're buying and returning, or you're collecting. You have a whole bunch of half useful things that are kind of good, right? And that can be financially, that can be very stressful. We're going to talk about the finances about that in a minute. You're investing in equipment that will most likely not go up in value. Some does, but most likely it won't. But that stuff's yours, and you've spent money on it. And I did this. I did a big purge. A few years ago, a few moves. We were moving out of a house to a whole other area, and I had a lot of stuff. And I just said, I can't carry this stuff to another house. I don't use it. I'm never going to use it. I just like to look at it. And if I just like to look at it, I made the decision, I got to get it. I sold a lot of stuff. And now, if you've paid attention, I don't come in with a whole lot of different guitars and different amps and things. I've found ones that work for me. Although I'd like to, but it just hasn't been worth it to me because I've done that. I've done my experimenting. The other part is juggling returns and payments. Buying something, trying out for a while, you don't like it. Okay, then you got to return it or sell it. And that is very time consuming. It's very stressful. It's something I don't like to do. That's why I would collect things, because I'd rather just let it sit there and earn and build some more money before I could do that. So, and that time that you're spending on that, on the great gear experiment, it never pays off in the long run. You're on a hamster wheel, You need to change your thinking from being a collector to a player. And it doesn't take much, if you think about it, to be a player. You need a guitar, you need an amp, and a few pedals, and a tuner. Most of right? And if these things that you have are proven classic gear, you're not taking a chance. You know that these things are going to work because they've worked for a lot of other players. You're in business. And then that time that you have to spend on music is going to be that. It's going to be spent on music. And when you're comfortable and you're confident with the tone that you have, then any experimenting you do will most likely just enhance what you've worked on before. Okay, that's part one. Let's go ahead and check the chat, make sure everything's going good as we go through. Okay, so everybody's talking about gear stuff. Good. Everything's going here. Chris says, I spent years with everything on full and hated my sound. Yeah, that's true. That's right. Different ways of working with gear too. Okay, so I don't see a whole lot. Okay, everything's looking like it's going smooth. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and move on to part two. And so we're going to have some more frustrations we're dealing with here. And the second one we're going to talk about today is being frustrated about playing out. Does this sound familiar? I could never do that. Or even worse, you can't do that. You will never be able to do that, being the recipient of that phrase. I'm just going to say this is really, I could say one sentence and we could be done and just turn it off right here. So I'm going to say, of course, I'm not going to turn it off, but I'm going to say, yes, you can. You can do that. You can do that. There's no one who gets to tell you whether or not that you can play music for people. There's no one that can say that. And there are all kinds of performers at all different levels. And they all have something very valuable to say. And are you on that path? Have you, from the time you pick up a guitar to the time that you've been playing for who knows how long, you have something valuable to say. It's discouraging, that sentence. It's a terrible sentence, and it's fear. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more in the next section. But when you start to play guitar, it's usually, if you could be the person who picks up the guitar just for something fun to do, and that's fine. You don't have to play out. But if you are one of the people who would love to play out, who would love to be performing, if that's a dream of yours, you can start working on that today. I tell them I said you could do it. Okay, blame me. All right, I'll take it. I don't care. You can play. You can play out today. You can start working on playing out today. You can start getting your stuff together. How about this? At what point can I start playing out? Well, who would be the judge of that, right? Who would say, well, you're not far along enough to play music for people? Who'd be the judge of that, really? Do you need to have achieved a certain level and be certified before you can play out? Have someone like a board of people say, you can now play out? We'd be in big trouble if we were only allowed to listen to certified players. That's not rock and roll, right? That's not it, you know? You can play. Have you seen someone play who you know wasn't an accomplished technical player that just, and it happens all the time, that you know this person is not a great player, but they do it in a way that's themselves, and it's very powerful. And it can be someone who hasn't spent a lot of time with the instrument, or someone who has worked more on their own sound than trying to be technically proficient at a guitar. It happens all the time. I see it all the time. I see bands that they're not really sure what's going on, but they have something valuable to say. Let's talk about what you need. What do you need to play music? What do you need? Evan, what do you think we need? Songs. That's all you need. You just need to be able to play some songs. Enough to fill the space that you want to play, a night of songs or a set of songs. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. They can be covers. They can be originals. They could be your own interpretations of cover songs. Whatever you need. You just need songs. And if anybody tries to tell you different, don't listen to them. You can start to get ready to perform today. Now, right now, there's not any performance venues open, but you could go out, you could start getting ready to play a solo gig at the end of your driveway for anybody who would drive past, right? Start today. Do it today. There's no one to tell you can't, and there's no one to stop you. No one can stop you from playing music. It's a whole different thing. It doesn't work that way. Are you going to be great? Well, what's that? What's being great? Who gets to judge who's great and who's not? Play a show for 10 different people and ask every single one of those people what they thought. You're going to get a lot of different opinions, aren't you, on a performance? You go all the way from somebody who smiles and loves it the whole time to someone who looks like they smell something bad and they just want to leave the whole time. No matter who you are. So that's at what point can I start, right? So the next frustration people get and these defeating thoughts because they want to play out, but they're frustrated that they can't, is what will people think? What will people say if I did it? So it's not about them at all. It's about you. Think about that. It's not about the people that you're playing for. It's about you. You're on a journey. Now, of course, the ultimate goal is you want to please the audience, right? But you're doing something. You're on a journey. You'll never get to your goal if you let their opinion stop you before you get started. You can't put other people's opinions ahead of your own. Can't. Not on this. You're on a journey. You've made a decision. It's time to go. And these people may love to listen to what you sound like, or they may not. Who cares, right? You're on a journey. You need to move forward. And that night of music or day of music or whatever it is just one step on your journey. And it might go well. And I can guarantee you it's never going to go well every time for anybody. It never happens. Even the best players have bad nights. Okay? Some people have bad nights for a long time. And you start to feel like, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to have a good night? Right? But you're on the journey. You've made a decision. It's about you. It's not about them. If I put other people's opinions ahead of my own, you would not be listening to this podcast right now. 100%. You have to, at some point, stop caring and do it. Okay? Now you want to be good and you want to take into account what people think. But you have to move forward. Here's another thing. It's taking too long to get to play out. Am I ever going to get to play out? Right? So we talked about it. It's a journey. This is not a race. Playing music is not like other professions. Let's call it a profession, right? Because sometimes when you call music a hobby, or you call it, just this thing I do, it belittles it a lot to me. Let's call it a profession. There's an element of time that you have to accept when you start to do this. And today, you have to realize that you're on something that takes time. You know about the saying, how many hours is it going to take me to get great? Take a person to master their instrument. What do they say? Like 10,000? I don't know. I may be wrong. 10,000 came to mind, but something huge like that. Is that true? Could be. Could you master your instrument in less than that? I would think so. I would think the whole thing would depend on what you did with those hours that you spent. If you spent 10,000 hours trying to learn how to play Smoke on the Water, right? 10,000 hours playing one song. You'd master that song, but would you master your instrument? No. Okay, so it takes time. It takes time. And what I like to try to help people with is to enjoy the little things on the way. And actually, those are very, very important. And the little things, as they keep coming and keep coming, you find out are the big things. They're the pure joys of playing music. And you can easily miss them if you're focused on being famous or huge concerts and those kind of things. There's much more important things that everyone can experience along the way. So there's big wins to be had when you focus on the journey about this. Okay, so that's the end of part 2. Let's take a look at the chat here. Okay, so Josh is talking about getting lost on stage. 10,000 hours, what they say. But you don't need to be messed with, right? It's probably hard to hear yourself on stage. Yeah, man, being able to hear yourself on stage is, I've got some wonderful stories to tell about that. Didn't know anything but some power chords and basic chords, and I still played. Right. Complete mastery of the instrument. I mean, you can master what you know. Right. That's my point. You know, and we're trying to get past that. It sets up, you know, a frustration ahead of time. So you're trying to get through all of these hours, and then I'll be a master of the musician of my instrument, right? There's a frustration too. Well, I got to do my hours. Just focus what's at hand, you know, and move forward. Okay, let's do part 3 here. And we're talking about, okay, in part 3, we're talking about musical communication. That's kind of a broad term. I'll narrow it down as we go through. But being frustrated about being able to play with other players, right? Musical communication. There's a big frustration. There's a couple worries and fears. The one thing that comes up again and again and again is that fear of being found out. They call it imposter syndrome. That I'm not very good, and I don't know why these people that I'm playing with are actually playing with me. And so I'm naturally going to try to act more like them. I have to act like I can cut it. And that's stressful, you know, very stressful. Trying to catch up when you're acting like you're already there. It's very stressful. And it happens, and not just in music, it happens in everything in life too. Well, let's bust this frustration. I've been in a lot of different groups, played in with a lot of different people. And in some, I may have been the person who was farthest along, and others, I was the least far along person, in all places in between. There are no groups, musical groups, where everyone is exactly at the same level. None. Not one. Not one that I've ever seen. And how boring would that be if everyone was exactly at the same level? You would lose something in a group, in a band. You lose perspective. If you had everyone in the band that was looking at something from exactly the same place, from exactly the same stage in their playing. The perspective in music is really the spice of it. It makes it wonderful when you have all of those people playing together, maybe coming at this one piece of music from different places. It makes it very complex. As a new player, who's to say that your perspective isn't any more valuable than an experienced player. Think about that. The way you look at it, the way you approach a song, the ideas that you might come up with. Even if it's just something that you try when you're playing a song. You might play a song and play something. You might be really good at triads and they're playing all seventh chords. Well, maybe that same song, just using triads, could have a whole different sound to it that may be very appealing. Music doesn't have to be complex all the time. Who knows? You could take the song in a different direction than an experienced player would play. They may have never thought about. And it would be the spice that brings a song to life. I know that when you're in a, not all groups are like this. Some have a leader who kind of, we're doing this. And then unless something happens where it's everybody says, oh, that sounds good, we should do that. That's kind of a more a totalitarian thing. But if you're usually a group of musicians, they're trying ideas off of each other, and whichever the best one goes. And I've never been in one where it was always the most experienced player in the band who came up with the best ideas. Simple in music is powerful. So, well, how about this? Frustration of musical communications. And you're in that situation. You're in a situation where you're frustrated, you're worried, you're frustrated, you're not playing the way that you would like to because you want to be just as good as those people. How about being honest about it? Take the pressure off. Just let them know, hey, I need to. What are you doing there? How can I do that? What do I need to know to be able to do that? It's okay. It's okay. If the best player in the world only wanted to play with other best players of the world, they would get very lonely because there's only one best player in the world, right? It's okay that you're not on the same point on the path. The more important thing is that you're on the path. It'll show anyway, right? As much as you try to hide it, it's going to show. Just be honest. Be comfortable asking questions when you don't understand something. And say you do get problems from that. Say you are in a situation with some players and you don't know what's going on and you ask questions about that and they give you a hard time. Well, if you get problems from that, those players aren't worth playing with in the first place. That's not putting the song first. To me, that's an ego type thing. And that brings us to negative treatment. Being treated negatively in a band, don't stand for it. Don't take it for a second. There are a lot of other players out there who would love to be playing music with you, right? If you're in a situation, somebody's treating you poorly, leave. Okay? Even if it's an underhanded little remark. You see, I've dealt with this before, right? So something that someone says and it kind of got swept under the rug and you go, guess what? There's going to be more. It usually happens all the time. What do? Call it out. Bring it up, right? Deal with it. And why would you want to do that? Would that make things better? Well, what it does is it puts you in a place where things can only go one of two ways. And so you'll know where you stand very quickly because our time is valuable. Okay? So either you're going to gain some respect and be known, let it be known that you're not going to put up with negative behavior. Okay? So that's the one way it can go. Or the other way it could go, it could escalate the situation. It can make people angry. Okay? Because you're not taking it, right? And then you'll know for certain that you're in the wrong place and it's time for you to go. Okay? So don't be afraid if you're feeling like you're being treated unfairly, to stand up for yourself. A lot of people don't, and they stay in these really dysfunctional groups. It's dealing with people. Anytime you deal with people, things can be very tough. You want to find the situation that's as enjoyable as you would have dreamed it to be, to want it to be. It's out there. It just takes some time. Let's talk about being frustrated with patience too. This is tough for some people. Music is kind of a test in patience from all angles, no matter where you are along the journey, from what you're doing. And you have to be patient with this. And it's very difficult for impatient people, for impatient new players, because you're building a difficult skill that's taking time, and you're dealing with people, and you have to be patient when you deal with people. No one's got this all figured out. It takes time, it takes work, and there's an element of trial and error too, which requires patience. And also, flip that around. A good thing to get in the practice of is extending that patience to others who might be as frustrated as you are that you may be playing in a group with. Cut them a little slack. You'll know when enough is enough. Just don't be too quick to judge others in bands, because they could be in the same boat as you, and you just aren't communicating well. Well, there we go. That is 3 of the biggest frustrations, and actually actually on Saturday, these are the ones that people requested. And there's one other one that I'll get to on its own podcast. And I thought they were very, very timely and very, very helpful, would be very helpful to a lot of people. So I'm very thankful for the folks in the community who helped me with this week. And if you are starting out and you're having some frustrations with technically playing the guitar, and usually that boils down to making things sound nice on the guitar when you're first learning. I have a guide for you. It's a free gift. It's called My Guide to Clear Sounding Chords. It's helped a lot of people. Still helping. I mean, it's the biggest download as far as my free guides at this point, and just getting bigger. It's really helpful. And I've got that free for you. It's over at playguitaracademy.com/chord guide. And if you're struggling with your chords, this can clear up some problems very quickly. It's not long, and it shows the basic steps that I take when I help someone who's going through that problem right away. Okay, thank you everyone so much for hanging out with me today for the Play Guitar podcast. I am going to call it. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. Also, I really appreciate if you could leave a review for the show. If you're just starting or new to the guitar, head on over to starthereguitar.com. You can check out my premium 11-week beginner's course. It's great. It will give you the foundations you need to move forward correctly on the guitar. Follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at playguitaracademy.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode. We did it. We did it. Hey, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with me, man. I'm going to come back and check the chat here. A lot of good chat going on. I missed all of it because I'm doing this podcast here. But I'm going to scroll back pretty far. Chaos Controls here. Hey, how you doing? Says I'm actually in the market for a new amp, so this is good. I was at Guitar Center the other day testing a couple amps that were in my price range and features. Yeah, Yeah, that's another part of it too. Price range. You know, a lot of these. When we talk about classic amps, we're talking about Marshall amps and Fender amps and Mesa Boogie, and you know those kind of things. And the two things that have to be weighed are: is it going to be able to do what you need it to do? Say you're playing in a band with a drummer, it's going to be able to compete with the drummer, and can you afford it? And if you know enough about the classic amps and the style of music that you want to play, you can, and most of the companies, you can even buy new, they make reissues of these classic amps. Like Fenders, they've got all the different reissues. And they've got the 1987X, which is kind of a souped up plexi, and then you've got the JCM 800. I mean, you can get reissues of those amps. I mean, can you afford them? And that's a patience game too. You know, if you saved up a couple more months, you might save yourself years of messing with an amp that, you know, may have been taking you off the path of what you really wanted, so you could get some decent stuff, you know, decent tones, you know. So that's one of those things that you have to weigh. Have a Fender Frontman and Epiphone Les Paul. That's a very good way to start out. David's got the Spark amp coming. And let's see here. Let's see, looking at the amp, before you go buying pedals and stuff, I'd start by rolling the gain knob up. You get it maybe even dirtier than you want, then roll the volume on your guitar back. Yeah, that's a really, if you look at like the Allman Brothers, anybody, you know, back then of the classic rock bands, they're tearing everything up and then they roll their volume knob back. It does two things. Yes, it does clean up, but in between full out and clean, there are tons of different, very subtle different tones as you roll your volume knob back that you can't get by having it full out all the time. And once you understand that, then you get very expressive. You can say, oh man, when I roll down to like 6, it's just, and then I can, on this note, I'll roll up a little bit more and get it accentuates that note, and then you pull back, and it opens up a whole world of expression on the guitar. I'm gonna go through a little bit more. Evan needs a bass to start writing. I think everybody should have a bass, at least one. Every guitar player should have a bass. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit farther. Okay, in this part of the chat, we're talking about how hard it is to hear yourself on stage, and that was a big adjustment. Yeah, especially when you're using combo amps, or actually, I've had when you're using closed back cabinets too. They can be very, very hard to hear yourself, and you think, well, why? They're super loud, but they're very directional. And if you're using even if you're using a 412 half stack, if you're not standing in the right, if you're standing off to the side of it, everyone in the audience is going to get their ears, you know, blown out, and you might not even be able to hear yourself. So you have to get inventive. If you're just playing regular amps, you know, sticking a mic in front of it, letting the sound man put some of your amp in the monitors, angling your amp back. If you have room on a stage, pushing your amps back as farther than you normally would to give that angle of the sound coming up to get to your ears instead of it just blowing by down by your knees, which is where it normally goes. But that's why I think a lot of people really like open back combos, because you're not just getting the sound coming from the front, it's also coming out the back, and it's bouncing around the stage a little bit more. You can hear yourself a lot better with it. I remember we did a Skydog tribute where we did the Duane Allman the first 4 songs or so we did all on twins, Fender Twins, because that's what the we did a Derek and a Dominoes, the that kind of the Layla stuff, and that was all done on Fender things. So they had the Fender amps out for us there. Then when we switched to the Allman Brothers stuff, we went to the Marshalls, and it was tough to hear yourself if you weren't standing in the right place. And then if it was so loud and you're standing in that place, you couldn't hear anything anyway because your ears would start ringing, right? It's tough. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna scroll down to where we're at right now. So Moshe says, great episode, Lee. Thank you, Moshe. It's great. I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for being here, man. And Josh says, some guys are really touchy about changing anything at all, so you got to watch that stuff. And Josh said, podcast was good, Lee. I think it'll help people out. Thank you. I thought this was a good idea. I want to do more of this frustrated stuff. Joe says, I have the Line 6 210. It's okay rather than have tube amps. You know, and that's I don't, when you're at the practice amp stage, I think a modeling amp is really good to have. And not for playing out, but because you can try different types of amps. And some of them, because of copyright things, they'll put different names. They'll call it like a blackface instead of a Fender, or they'll have different kind of names. But it's worth your time, depending on the amp, to find out, well, what amp that was on that model that they used, and does this match the style of music that I'm playing? That's very important information. That'll tell you later on down the road when you're ready to be playing out and you want to have something that in your style, that you'll get that. You'll know, you'll weed out all of the other noise, all the other amps, and you'll say, okay, I'm looking for something in this style. Once you can focus on that, you can see what's available, and get you in the ballpark instead of just trying what they, a lot of times people go into the guitar store and say, oh, I'm looking for an amp, and then the guy's going to point you to whatever they've got, and that may or may not be a big mistake for you along the way. So Brennan says, really enjoyed the episode, Lee, especially section on imposter syndrome. I've definitely felt that before when playing with people. Yeah, don't let that get to you, man. Don't let it get to you. It's not worth it. It's not worth. And it's hard to get. It's easy for me to say that. I know it's tough. It's tough to talk yourself out of it. Especially when you're playing with people who are very kind of overpowering people. Let's see here. Evan says, in my band was mostly collaboration between 2 guys, but ideas would come from anywhere. Anything I contributed, which wasn't must, was basically stuff I brought in that we worked through together. Yeah, but that was important too. Let's see here. Jim says, hey, Jim, good to see you. Jim says, thank you, Lee. Great advice applicable to life in general, not just guitar. Thank you, Jim. I think so too. I had fun getting this one together. Evan says, I've got an orange Micro Terra. It's a tube preamp with a solid state power section. You get some decent tube sounds at lower volumes that way. Yeah, probably would take a full tube amp at some point though. Mm-hmm. Wes got here late. Hey, Wes, good to see you. Good to see you. Jim says, I'd love to hear more about why every guitar player should own a bass, perhaps on an upcoming podcast. Yeah, it's good to know. When you're playing in a band, guitar and bass are like this. And guitar players that have never played bass expect bass players to be playing guitar. Okay? And expect it to make sense. And it's, even though they're set up similar, they look similar, the low 4 strings have the same name to those strings. The approach to the guitar is 100% different. And until you understand that, you can't take advantage of it. Being able to have a bass part and a guitar part that lock together is when you can do that, it's fantastic, and a really good way to understand when you have another instrument that you are having to communicate with all of the time. If you can understand their language and they can understand your language, it's very important. Very important. I've been playing bass since someone let me pick their bass up when I was in my teens, and I started saying, "Oh, okay. Look, I'm talking about bass, and look at my hand. Look at the difference. I'm not like this. I'm like this, right? Right there, it's changed, and bass, guitar can be a mix of blocking chords, right? Chord, and lines, melodic lines that weave their way through the chords. Structured thinking, linear thinking. And when you're playing a line, you can do different things. You can, and you can with chords too, but you can flow through things differently and choose the way you're going to do that. And bass is a lot like lead guitar playing. You're playing over a chord, right? And you've got single notes for the most part, single notes, and the notes that you pick will either match the chord or they'll have some sort of tension in between till you get to the next chord, right? So understanding the bass, and also for the obvious thing, which is like if you're songwriting and you want to have some low end down, or you want something, you want a certain bass line or a riff, something that goes with the riff. That's the obvious thing. But the not so obvious things are really getting everything together as far as communicating between the two instruments. That's why I think every guitar player should play a little bass so they understand what's going on, and understanding that bass is not an inferior instrument. But by no means it is. It's an extremely important instrument. It can be argued about how important it is compared to all the other instruments. It's extremely important. And that whole well, I'm not so good at guitar, so I'm gonna play bass. So that you give that kind of thought process to the bass player. It's not that way at all. Bass can make or break any piece of music. So I love playing bass. I wish I had my bass with me right now. It's in storage right now. Jim says, let's remember about why okay, that's what I just read. And Wes says, what are your thoughts on modeling software? Currently have a Spark amp on order, but I'm using software on my iPad with desktop speakers. Seems really versatile from what I'm learning. Yeah, I think it's great. That's what I'm using right now. Oh, sorry, that was loud. I'm using this Line 6 fly rig, but only because I don't want to tax the computer. I've got the Bias software on here that I really like. And I've always had some sort of software for my computer things. Just never been in a place where I could turn my amp all the way up and not get negative reactions from that. And I think it's a good way to learn about amps too. So when you're ready to get the real thing, you come from an informed place. Chris says, awful when bass replicates guitar. It's a real turnoff when you see bands. Yep. Well, matchup in some places, not all the time, right? And to play with timing between the guitar pieces is always fun too. Yep. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with me today. This is a good one. I think this is going to help out a lot of people. I think your contributions towards this podcast were excellent, and I tried to do my best to flesh those out this morning, and I think it went pretty well. And so I'll be editing these and splitting them up into smaller videos if you just want to check out the section over the next couple of days. I've been uploading them at night only because that's as soon as I could get them out. But But keep your eyes open for those, so we can go back over the stuff. There was a lot of stuff in this one. I wrote a lot of a big outline for this one. So I'm this is Monday. The podcast is done. Going to editing and working on some things, and I will see you all on Friday, and we'll have our hangout on Friday. Guitar talk on Saturday. Another hangout. I'm going to start. I want to have each one of the days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, have their own theme, kind of like I have guitar talk on Saturday. So be thinking about that too. I'm going to be thinking about that. Evan says, great one, Lee. Awesome. Evan, thank you. Wes says, thanks, Lee. Gloria, thanks, Lee. Good to see you, Gloria. David, are you back from Tallahassee? Good to see you, man. Good one. And then Brennan says, thank Lee and everyone. Great hangout today. Joe says, thanks, Lee. Great show today. See you guys later. Enjoy your evening. Okay. I'll see everybody on Friday. Bye-bye.